Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Really just thrilled to share a conversation with Dhee. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, this evening, your time at least.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I have to tell you, I haven't had very many Australians on the program. And so I'm really, really grateful for that. And the Australians that I have had are all my family members. You know, making music often involves maintaining a love affair with the music and particularly sort of keeping it innovative and new, but then also being very content with the work. And so I've always wondered this from artists who've been successful. Does it feel like you're constantly learning how to love not only just the music, but the process of making music and especially keeping that kind of love affair active every day?
I think I love it so much in general. So it doesn't feel like it's a struggle to love it every day. But I think no, I don't really, never really felt like, oh, I have love it so much. But some days I really sometimes I feel it's tough being vulnerable sometimes in music. I think that's something that I can sort of struggle with sometimes because I feel like you're thinking a lot, it's like, can I say that? Can I actually say that in my song? Like, can I do this? So that sometimes I struggle with, but I obviously end up doing it because I think that's the point, I guess. I don't know. But no, I don't know if I've ever struggled to like love it because I think I love it so much.
Yeah.
And it never feels like work.
Right. And because you love it so much and because the art itself is at the core of who you are, has that process and that, that pace, even some of the grind of being vulnerable in the studio or on stage during a performance, has that part become that much easier, right? Or is it such that like, no, every time I go on stage, there's still the butterflies, there's still, the pieces there that I need to kind of work and have you developed even maybe a different process now as compared to when you were first starting out?
Yeah, I think I still get really nervous when I go on stage, but I think it's a bit different to like before where it's kind of like I get overwhelmingly nervous and now it's a bit more like I enjoy it. It's that like it's a feeling that I enjoy and I think it's something that I think I should probably I'd always want to feel it, I think. I think there's something about that. But
that good nervous energy.
Yeah, because I think it's because I respect the stage. I feel like it's that because I think I respect being there.
Do you, by the way, that word respect, I mean, do you feel like now compared to when you were first starting out, is there maybe a different respect for the process and all the things that go into putting on a stage performance, getting a studio album out there? Has that part, sort of evolved over time?
It's a lot of work. So I think like putting out an album is like, it takes so much out of you. And for me, at least for me, I can speak for myself. It takes a lot out of me. And I think, but it's my favorite thing to do. It's like, I love it, So I think even doing shows, I think it's a lot of work. I think it's like, you put a lot of like energy into it, right? So, but it's still such an amazing thing and I love it. And there's no, I would never trade it for anything. I would never sort of trade any part of it. So yeah, I think it's something, and I love the process. Like the process is what I really love as well. Like, even though it takes a lot out of me, it's something that I really enjoy. I love practicing. I love rehearsing. I love rehearsals. In general, I love practicing and learning. And I think even being on stage is kind of like practice, sort of. Also, you're learning.
Each iteration gets better and better and better.
Yeah, for sure. So that's how sorry.
I was just going to say, are there things that you perhaps in the beginning of your career or when you were first starting out that seemed much more like a chore that now you appreciate that much more and you do find that like, wow, this is something that I never thought that I would really, really enjoy. And yet part of that process is kind of like, these days you're just like, no, I love that part. Whereas in the beginning, perhaps that never made so much sense to you.
Yeah, I think it's probably like recording because I've always loved performing so much. And it was only like later in like I think when I was like 15, 16 is when obviously 14 when I got into a studio, or 15 and even then I wasn't really comfortable singing to a mic because I'm so used to singing out, right? So like that was new for me, and I was like, oh, okay, this is new. Like recording in a studio, like in a room, that's a different,
no audience. Yeah, totally different.
Yeah, that's a different thing, right?
Yeah.
But I think I really learned to love that. Like I really, honestly, I think it's just now it's sort of something that it feels like a safe space in a way. I love being in the studio as much as I love being on stage. And I really enjoy this. Like this is like right now, this is my little studio, and I really enjoy being in this space and working. So yeah, so I think that's probably something that's changed over time, because I've always never really, not that I didn't appreciate it. I don't think I've ever not appreciated any part of this, but like, I guess I enjoy it a lot more now.
Yeah. Yeah. And sort of like if it's a safe space, it means that you can sort of be yourself and be even more authentic and even more vulnerable and kind of let yourself go in that way. With the upcoming album, Jackfruit, I'm sure it was a super just sort of labor of love and really some deep storytelling that comes from that. I'm always so curious to understand from artists, how do you know? I mean, especially as you just mentioned that you've grown to love and really enjoy even more the studio environment, and it's a safe space. But how do you know perhaps when a song is finished? Like, when do you like know that, like, okay, I don't know what it is, but that's it. It feels complete. It feels like I have finished something that I'm proud of and that I want to get out there.
That's a great question. I actually don't know, because I struggle with that. I really struggle with that because but you know what? I think there's a point where it feels like, for me, it feels like I've said what I need to say, and I can hear the song and I can hear it the way I love it. I love listening to it, or it's in sort of I don't know. It's that, like, you feel like it's ready, and I think I've only recently started feeling that. So for the longest time, I struggled with that. Like, sort of feeling like it's done. It's ready. I've struggled with that, but now I'm kind of like, now I think I'm like, I do feel like, okay, this is ready to be out.
Does it have to feel sort of like, do you sometimes have to come back to the song and even like a recording and say, you know what, look, I need to let this marinate for a little bit and figure it out? Or are there different times where you're just like, okay, I don't know what that was, but that's it. And it feels right. And I can hear it and I can see it as I'm performing it. And sort of like this, I imagine that there's an element of having a sort of out of body experience, going like, yeah, boy, something about that just feels right.
Yeah. So sometimes, like, the first version ends up being the favorite thing. And I think that's, like, they call it the dematitis as well. It's like your first version, you kind of get, But I think there's been so many instances where I was like, okay, this is not ready yet. I kind of go back and forth. I revisit the song so many times, even like lyrics, even melody sometimes, even, just like lyric, melody, arrangement. I'm sort of play around with it a lot. So sometimes it's kind of like I go back and forth. Sometimes it's just like, hey, this is it. I think this is like, it sounds, and those songs end up being really fun, to be fair, because it's just like straight up instinct, right? So I think by fun, I mean it ends up being very, I think fun is a kind of I think it's an appropriate word to use, because I think it just ends up being more honest as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that honesty and fun come from being more comfortable with your instinct, especially as you mature and develop and get more experience as an artist?
I think so. And I think it's also just like being comfortable with yourself as well. Like a big part of it is that too. I think it's like, I feel like for me, it's like, it is just sort of when I feel like, okay, I'm honest to myself, or if I'm just kind of being honest to myself, and that comes out, I end up really feeling very happy about it, and a lot more, even though it might be very embarrassing, I might be a bit like, I feel a bit like vulnerable about it, it still ends up for me feeling like, okay, I've done my part. Sort
of putting your best self out there.
So I think, so that way I feel like, that ends up kind of feeling a bit more satisfying. Or
I've been fascinated with some of your work and getting to listen more and more. And by the way, thank you for occupying a lot of my playlists these days. So that's great. In making more English language music, and I imagine it's somewhat of a pivot from Tamil and definitely from Telugu or even Malayalam and all those songs, at least thematically, when you think about the writing and the production part of it. And I'm sure a lot of was gained from sort of having some of the work now be in English, the language you kind of at least personally grew up speaking in Australia, for sure. I guess what I'm thinking about is that as there's so much gained from making an English language song or an English language album, I'm also curious, do you feel like anything was actually left behind? Was there anything lost from pivoting away from some of the South Asian language work that you've been doing?
I don't think so, no. Obviously, like, I'm singing in a different language to what I've been singing in movies. No, I think for me, no, I don't think so. I don't think I've left anything behind.
Instead, maybe is it sort of like hey, this was just, a different part of me that I'm just finally getting out there and exploring?
Yeah. So like what's really interesting for me, or like even for people around me, they've always felt like this is me. So this is like, so now I'm sort of realizing, oh, that's like, like outside, that's not me. Like that's
right.
like, that's yeah. So only when I start releasing things, I'm like, oh, okay. It's like, yeah, this part of me has never been out, but this is like always been me. And it's always like I think for people like who sort of heard my music or who've kind of known me for years now, for them, they're like, this is the Dhee that we know. And I think this is, so it's very interesting that way.
Right.
But,
right.
But also like, I also understand because, but I think when you sing in movies, it's it's not so personal, but like, but it becomes such a big part of your identity, right?
Right.
Even, yeah. And you're singing for a movie, for a character, but it's amazing that how it ends up being such a big part of who you are, right? Sorry, I'm saying right a lot. I think it's like a new thing that I've like, I don't know where I picked it up.
Well, the thing is, like, I've heard some of your work and your interviews in Tamil as well.
Oh, Tamil, yeah.
And you flow and you sound like you're being so authentic and being yourself. And so I wonder if, like, because it's so embedded that, yes, they're film songs, yes, they're character songs, and yet it's a big part of who you are, that maybe pivot is the wrong word, and more that this is just more of, another form of expression for you. It's additive in that way. They both sort of are building blocks.
That's exactly, I think, how I feel, because I don't think I was never a different person singing like playback as well. I was still me, and I'm still me. So I think it's just a different expression. I think it's obviously when you write your music and you're composing and you're writing, there's obviously like every part of you's in there. So that's kind of the difference, I think. But even in like playback, I think I still remained independent in thought and in every way. So yeah. So I think
when you think about all the different venues and the themes here, whether it's as an independent artist, whether it's in English, whether it's in another language, whether it's, part of a cinema or of a film, that there's always this kind of dance between exploration and comfort. That like, hey, this is something that I'm comfortable with. I can reproduce it. I can keep going with it. Or no, this is something kind of new, and it's a new exploration. It's a new addition. It's a building block, as we talked about. And in thinking of yourself and doing this for over a decade now, how have you been able to weave and even find this concept of home in your music? Does that resonate with you? Is there a feeling of home that you find in your music, no matter what language or what venue or what theme it takes?
I do. I think for me, music is like this makes me feel very safe. It's the place where I can sort of like rest everything, like rest whatever I'm feeling. It's that place, right? So it is home, and it's something that I've always had in my life. It's like my kind of like, I know it's corny, it's very corny to say, but it's like my first love as well, you know?
Yeah.
It is my first love.
Right.
First and probably like consistent, hopefully consistent love. So, um, but, um, but
I
yes,
think it's safe to say that, right?
I think for me, it's my home. Like it is like, I think it's been there through everything. And I've sort of, it's where I put all my, like, rest my hat or whatever, everything. I
Right.
rest
Right.
everything there. So, you know, so that's kind of, yeah.
Do you have to, just like for anyone, right? Like people love their homes and then they go and take vacations and then they go out and explore. And for each of these explorations that you do, and whether they've been explorations so far or explorations in the future, is it important for you to have that sense of home and belonging and comfort and safety, yet at the same time, like doing something that's brand new and innovative? And how do you sort of marry both of those together?
I think for me, every time I've sort of felt a little bit like, not uncomfortable, but sort of like just a little bit like not touching the ground, but a little like I'm floating or
Uh,
not really drowning.
yeah.
That spot has always been such a liberating place to be in.
Yeah.
So I think, and I think, I don't know if I consciously try to be there, but I think naturally you sort of gravitate towards that spot. So I think, I don't think I've never really consciously thought about these things like while making music, but I think naturally you sort of gravitate towards that point.
Right. Right.
And I think it's just like, yeah, I think it's just like, you know, when you sort of make music and when you feel like you can't think of a reference, I always feel like that's a good thing. Like that's kind of a, like if I can't think of a reference for it, like a mixed reference or like any reference, I feel like that's kind of a really interesting place to be in. It's not like no one's doing anything absolutely original in this world that nobody else has done. But like, you know, when you can't find a reference for something, I think it's sort of, I feel like that's a space where, I don't know, like could
No,
be,
I love that.
yeah,
Yeah. I love how you put that, when it's hard to come up for a reference for something, especially immediately,
yeah,
there's a tickle that comes from that, right? That's just sort of
yeah,
like, hey, that's something fresh. It's new.
yeah.
And yet
It's also
if,
scary as
yeah,
well. You're like, oh no, what are we doing? What, like, you know?
uh,
But
right.
it's also, yeah, it's also like you said, it's kind of a nice place to be in.
Yeah. And I mean, I imagine that for you, it sort of like adds to sort of the adventure of all of this as well.
Yeah.
I was listening to Nai Mataka and, thinking about, this as a Hindi song. And of course, I think one of your first Hindi songs, is that
My
correct?
first. It's
Very
my first
first.
ever.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when I think about that, I think about your English stuff. I think about all the other languages. Is there an intentionality, as you mentioned, that idea that there's no real reference? And for you, this is now a new point of reference. Is there an intentionality in a way to having that versatility in all the different versions of your music? Does that add to the kind of feeling of home? Because there's just so many, kind of shapes to this, so many
Yeah.
avatars of this, if you will.
I mean, I've never considered myself as like a versatile singer. Like I don't, I've never thought about it like that. I've never considered myself because I feel like I sing the only way I know how to sing. So it's just that I've been so lucky to be part of so many different, uh, you know, songs and films, like so many different kind of songs that, and I've just been really blessed because someone thought he would work in this,
Sure.
So I've just been lucky that way. I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly. I hope I
No,
understood the question.
I'm not sure if there is a right answer to that, but I mean, I guess thinking about like, is if you purposefully think about the versatility of this simply because you're reaching so many different audiences with each language, and maybe that's just a natural, normal extension and reflection of who you are.
I think like, yeah, I think like, in a way when you sing in so many different languages and when you sing in so many different types of music as well, I think you're sort of you're very lucky to be connecting with so many different people, and I think language is such a beautiful thing. For me, like, I love singing in different languages because I think it's, and I love understanding them as well. Obviously, when that happens, I think you're sort of like, it just opens this part of your, like, creatively as well. I think it's such an exciting thing to be singing in a different language, and also just connecting with people from different parts of the world and parts of the country, obviously.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of yapping away, but
No, you're doing great. I mean, and you know what, yapping away, and whether that or not, the truth is that like you said, you're just connecting with so many more people who can now relate to you in a way. And when I think about, being able to have those opportunities, you've worked with some absolutely amazing producers and musical directors and other artists over the years. Those collaborations have been terrific, right? I mean, some of the best singers and musicians that are out there. When you build so many of these partnerships, and when you're reaching different audiences, and now and you're connecting with different people sort of artistically, what if you actually had to unlearn about yourself, perhaps each time that you have a collaboration, or that that you're discovering something new? Are there parts of yourself that you've had to say, like, I kind of need to unlearn and unwind this about myself?
Yeah, I think for me, I don't think, like, when I always walk into something feeling like I don't know anything. So, like, I just sort of like, I try to be a sponge, and then I try to sort of absorb everything that I can. So I always feel like I don't know anything. So I, like, never felt like I had to unlearn something. But I think maybe I think, like, this is but maybe not the answer, but I think it's like, I'm very self-critical. So sometimes when I walk into, like, a studio, I sometimes have to stop being so self-critical, and and it's helpful because you're in an environment where you just have to trust someone. You have to
Right.
trust. So I just have to take a step back and not be self-critical.
Yeah.
So
Has
I
it
think
built
that,
your confidence then with each of these?
yeah, for sure. I think I've definitely felt like, when you work with so many amazing talents, I think you end up learning so much, right? I think you learn a lot. I learn a lot from them. Uh, and I think like, I always walk away learning something new, like, just even littlest thing, just could be like being very efficient with how you record things, or it could be the littlest to, like, really big things, So I learned so much from every recording experience that I think, like, that, yeah. So maybe when it comes to unlearning, I think it's only because I truly feel like I, like, don't know anything. So I go in, like, feeling like I don't know anything, like, and I'm ready to, like, so that's why I don't know if I had to unlearn something, except, like, maybe a lot of, like, the mental things that kind of happen, like being self-critical, or being very like, oh, am I doing well? Am I
Right.
doing this? All of
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is what I feel
Although,
like
I imagine that as someone who's, you put your art out there, you're constantly sharing your work, you're, like you mentioned earlier, you're making yourself vulnerable either on the studio or on stage, developing that confidence, and feeling like you're not necessarily coming at a project where you have any ego. Is that also kind of a tough balance? Because at some level, developing that confidence, I imagine that it's tough to sometimes leave your ego outside the recording studio or off the stage.
yeah. I think I try to, like when I'm working with people, I try to be as sort of, you surrender to each other. I think that's like, you
Yeah,
sort of, um, and that's what makes it beautiful and fun, when you can be collaborative. And I think every person that you work with, they have something amazing to contribute, and to sort of, for you to learn from, really, right? So I
totally.
think, I think, like, you just, whatever ego that you may have, you leave it behind, like,
Yeah.
because
And that
I
probably
think,
adds to the music as well.
yeah, because I think it's just, and I really, in my head, I really don't think, like, I I don't really, I mean, I'm sure there's ego, but in music, I think that I feel like I just it shouldn't be there. I just sort of leave it behind because I think it's just about sort of learning and sharing. And I think it's beautiful when you don't have ego sort of, like looming over you.
Sure. Sort
So
of
I think
liberating not to have that hanging over you.
exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think sometimes we don't even know when it takes over. So that's that takes a lot of like reflecting and sort of, that it takes a lot of that. But I think usually when I have to be in a room and I have to work with someone, I think it's so fun when you just sort of let yourself be open and be free and be honest with each other, then sort of have that that I know what I'm talking about. I know,
Right.
yeah. So I think that makes...
Yeah, the collaborations, I imagine, get better, the music itself, and it comes back to the art and the music, and it sort of allows for a lot more focus on that.
Yeah.
Your work and your music and your story live at so many intersections, right? Culturally, linguistically, nationally, artistically. How have you been able to sort of connect all the dots here? Does all of this make you a prouder Australian, or does it make you a more unique Sri Lankan or South Asian? Is there a way to connect all the dots, especially for those who are getting to learn about your story more and more?
I think for me, it just sort of makes me sort of I think all of these things were sort of a result of me feeling sort of comfortable with myself, comfortable in my own skin, comfortable with my everything. And it's taken me a really long time to sort of, come to that place and where I'm, truly happy with who I am and comfortable with who I am, just, and everything that sort of comes with it. So, yes, I think for me right now, I'm not even thinking about my identity so much, because I think it's just, you've come to a point where it's a part of you and it's there, and it's, it's there. And I think for me, if Fruit Song is, if it's anything, it's the fact that I think I got to sort of express all of that into that song. And then once I put it out there, I think I was free. I was just liberated. And I think I could just, now every time I talk about that song, it's very difficult for me to talk about it because I feel like I've come to a different stage in a way, to when I wrote it. I think that was when I was sort of, I was obviously kind of not in a conflicted space. I was still sort of more resolved, but still, I had a lot more feelings about it. And now I think I'm just kind of in a different space, I think. So I think when I think about these things, I just right now I'm just in a really comfortable space where I'm comfortable with who I am. So I'm not even thinking, well, I'm very proud. I'm a very proud Tamil Australian. That's all, goes without saying. But it's not something that I'm giving a lot of thought to as much as I probably would have done at that point of time, if that makes sense. I don't know if that sort of...
No, it does.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the consciousness of it is kind of more subtle, and it's not necessarily top of mind, and it's not at the forefront, and the music in a way sort of speaks for itself.
Yeah, I feel like that's what I'm sort of feeling, because it's just, I felt free, and I felt like I got it out of my chest and my shoulders as soon as it put it down.
Yeah.
And as soon as I wrote, I was like, I can't write another song like this.
Right.
I don't think I can. That's what it felt like. I was like, I'm done. I've said everything I've needed to say. And every time I write a song, that's kind of how I feel. Like, I've said everything I've needed to say in this particular thing.
Right.
So, yeah, sorry.
I wonder, when the music, and goes back to more the industry side here, when the music is tied so heavily to film and maybe other commercial anchors, how do artists and audiences cultivate and accelerate more trust in independent music? How can we find a sort of happier level of understanding? And how do artists maybe, take more control over that music making, independent of having to have it anchored in film and other commercial endeavors?
Do you know, now I think there's been a shift. I feel like there's a shift where independent music is actually redefining pop music.
Mm,
And
yeah.
I've been seeing that a lot, and I don't know. Think independent music is redefining pop, and artists are a lot more open to kind of talk about their stories and sing about their experiences, and very, obviously be very personal with what's kind of going on in their life. And I think that wasn't as celebrated as it is now. I think at one point it was just all about film music, and now I think independent music is redefining. And I think when I can think of so many examples now that it is so amazing to see. So I think
And maybe that's a shift in the power structure also.
yeah, I think so, because now there's like a demand for honest storytelling, I think.
Mm, yeah.
And when that shift happens, I think people want to hear what you really want to say. I think they want to know. And I think that's also changing in films as well. I think even if you see the type of films that kind of are coming out or doing really well, they're usually very sort of, it comes from a really personal space for the filmmaker as well. But I think mostly in music, I think that's been a huge shift, and that's been really nice to see, because like long overdue as well. So, yeah.
For you, is that in a way, I mean, never mind the power part of this, and never mind the sort of having to anchor things to film and kind of this great, blossoming of independent music that's out there. But for you, is that kind of the secret of staying relevant in the industry? Just being honest about your work, and on top of that, making music that sort of comes from your heart?
I don't know if it helps me be relevant, but I think it helps me feel very, I think it just makes me feel like I feel like that's my purpose. So it makes me personally feel like I'm doing something that I should be doing. I think you constantly try to find a purpose, right? I think you're always through your art and whatever you do. And I think for me, I feel like when I speak about these things, hopefully someone else resonates with these things, and I hope I make meaningful connections through this. But I don't know if it helps me stay relevant. I don't know, but it definitely makes me feel like this is what I should be doing, and it brings me a lot of joy doing this. But yeah, and it's also difficult, but like sometimes it's the easiest thing to do. Sometimes it's like the hardest thing to do. So, of
course,
so I think I don't know if it makes me stay relevant, but it makes me feel like I'm doing something right. If that makes sense.
I saw on Instagram a really lovely acoustic version of one of your songs, and the lyric that caught me, of course, is that the past is written on my body and the future is in my mind. And I'll get you out of here on this one. I was thinking, when it's all sort of said and done, and as your work evolves and your audiences grow, and those who are revisiting your music, and then those who are even learning about your music for the first time, what do you actually hope your legacy might be as an artist? What do you hope that your sort of lasting impressions are going to be on those folks who are rediscovering your music, and those who are just, hearing it for the first time?
I think for me, when someone listens to my music, if they can sort of see themselves in it, and if they feel, I know a lot of my favorite artists have made me feel so many beautiful things. I felt seen. I felt like I've really sort of kind of understood what I'm feeling through listening to like a Nina Simone song. So I think if someone can listen to my music and sort of feel happy or feel better about something that they're going through, that would be like the biggest success for me. If they can listen to it and walk away feeling a certain kind of way that makes them feel better, and sort of do this life thing in a more, I guess, happier way, or just, in any way that is progressive to them, that I would feel really amazing. And I think that would be the greatest legacy or whatever I can leave behind. So I think for me, it's just kind of making meaningful, as a connections, meaningful in like I guess, connections, right? So I think it's that. I think that's what makes me feel, even now, I think that's what makes me feel like successful, if I can say that. That's what makes me feel that way. Because when someone says, your song made me feel this way, like it made me feel, when I heard this, I felt this way. And that makes me feel like really happy. And it doesn't matter, like even if 1,000 people say, oh, okay, God, and what is this? When someone says this to me, I feel really happy. And I'm like, my job is done. My job is done. So that's kind of, probably I think that would be something that I would feel very proud of as well. And I would want to leave.
Sure. And I mean, whether it's making connections or resonating with people and seeing themselves in your music, I know lots and lots of audience members and listeners out there are really enjoying it and looking forward to more. Dhee, thank you so much
Thank you
for
so
joining
much.
us. This
Thank
was such a
you.
lovely conversation. It was truly lovely, and we're so grateful for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time. Thank you.